The thing about these projects is like you want to reveal a layer of these superstars that nobody knows about. That is like the main thing going in. I'm like, if I don't teach people something new about Patrick Mahomes, like I haven't done my job. And it was the most nervous I've ever been in my entire career. I basically had to present my vision for the series to a room of Chiefs executives, Skydance executives, NFL Films executives. There were like 40 high-powered people in this room as I was kind of given the floor to like take them through how I saw this unfolding. And it was the scariest thing ever.
The big question is, did you get to meet Taylor Swift? Today's guest, Kristen Lappas, is an Emmy-winning director and producer at Words and Pictures, one of the best production companies in the business. She's done critically acclaimed films like Dream On, Giannis, The Marvelous Journey, and her latest project, which I'm excited to talk to her about today, is The Kingdom, chronicling the 2024 season for the Kansas City Chiefs, along with their history and backstory. It's an incredible series that's now streaming on Disney and ESPN+. Kristen Lappas, thank you so much for coming on Frame by Frame.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited to be here. Some of my favorite people have done your podcast, so when you asked
me,
of course.
I know, we had so many cross references. So there's so many things I want to get into today, but The Kingdom, it just came out. We're very early in the NFL season. It's very fitting. Congratulations. When did you know you were going to direct this big project, and how did it all come together for you?
Well, thank you. And it was a very long process, as these things usually are. I work for a company called Words and Pictures, and I'm a staff director there, which is a little bit unconventional for this space. But I work really closely with Connor Schell. He was the creator of 30 for 30, and he is from Kansas City. And the Chiefs have been his team since he was a little kid. And so after they won their second consecutive Super Bowl, he reached out to President Mark Donovan and owner Clark Hunt just to say, hey, look, Words and Pictures, like, this is what we do. This is such an important moment, historical moment in the history of the NFL. And we would love to come along for the ride and see what happens and document this really special season. But I think what resonated most with the organization was that it wasn't just going to be a follow doc on the 2024-2025 season. It was going to be a jump. The current season was essentially going to be a jumping off point to kind of talk about the history of the franchise, dating back to the owner, Lamar Hunt, who has a fascinating story. All of the personal narratives of, the bigger than life superstars like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. So it was going to be essentially, he sold them on kind of a last dance structure where we have this current day arc and then we're kind of flashing back and telling more personal stories. He came to me shortly after he had those meetings with them, and he was like, listen, like, I think this thing is on the horizon. And he's like, I think you'd be great for it. So, I mean, it was an honor. And it was an opportunity of a lifetime. I think one thing that kind of sold the Chiefs on me, specifically Andy Reid, was the fact that I'm a coach's kid. So my dad was a college basketball coach for 25 years, most notably at Villanova University, which is outside of Philadelphia. He was there as an assistant for, I believe, 5 years, and he was the head coach there for 9 years. And he knew Andy Reid because they overlapped when Andy was at the Eagles. And so it sounds silly, but I just think there was like this instant trust between Coach Reid and I the first time I met him. He kind of knew I had lived on the other side, and I wasn't going to burn him. I was going to be really honest, and I was going to be authentic to the story, but there was just a trust there. And so I think that really helped sell the Chiefs on the project. So that's how it kind of all began. We got the green light last August, and our first day of production was week 1, Thursday Night Football, Chiefs, Ravens. So that was like our first official shoot on the project.
Holy cow. Well, hopefully it's a little bit of relief this year for football season, a little break. I know how grueling football season can be, especially when you're, hanging on a thread by every week what happens. But oh my gosh, that's incredible. There's so many things I want to unpack there, because I think what really struck out to me watching it was the buy-in all the way, from the top, from the front office to Coach Reid to the players. And it sounded like that little personal anecdote really kind of helped you get in the door with the buy-in. And was it pretty consistent throughout? I know these things obviously take time. You're starting week one, like there's not a lot of time to build relationships and trust. How did you do that whole dance with just really becoming flies on the wall?
I mean, you know this better than anyone. It does take time. The first person that I met within the organization was the communications director, Brad G. And he goes, Coach Reid is a guy that plays a game of inches, and he's a game of inches when it comes to trust. And like, he will give you bit by bit a little more trust, and you have to earn that trust. But if you mess something up, you're back like 10 yards. And so I came in with that mentality, which was like, Coach Reid had never let cameras in his locker room. He was apprehensive to do this. And again, we sold him on us essentially, being invisible and respectful. And, at the beginning, our access was not great, if I'm being totally forthcoming with you. Like, it just wasn't.
And that makes sense too, starting so late in the season. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, it was almost an impossible task for our team. It's like, hey, week one, try to get buy-in with these like superstars that are trying to do this historical thing. And they're all so focused, which as they should be, you know what I mean? And so I also have to give a lot of credit to, there were two producers who were on our team, Nick Manning and Jasper Cicero, and they moved to Kansas City for the season. I have young kids. I had to go back and forth. So these guys, they moved there, and we kind of divided and conquered when it came to trust. And so I was kind of like, let me handle the front office, the general manager, the coaches. And, you guys who are essentially peers with these players, like, you guys kind of build those relationships. And I got to give them credit. Like Nick Manning, he was like the defensive guy. He got tight with like Chris Jones and George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. And so, it's such a short timeline and a short season that we had to work that way, right? We all had to kind of go on our own lanes in terms of trust building. But I think it paid off. And our goal was always, by the time we get to the playoffs, we need to have that trust and we need to be in the right rooms. And I think we accomplished that. And some of the best access we got was the week of the Super Bowl. I mean, we're with Patrick Mahomes 24 hours before he plays the biggest game of his life as he's getting a haircut.
Getting his haircut. Yeah.
And so and he's being super honest and forthcoming just about the pressure and all the expectations people have of him. And so we're not in that space. We're not in the locker room after the loss for Chris Jones's really passionate, emotional speech if we don't build that trust throughout the season.
That's cool. It's like investments, like you said, that those small inches over time really, granted you the best access for the climax of the story. And with that, I'm curious, it sounded like, Connor obviously is a legend in the space. He had a sense of like how to structure this. And then kind of once this thing was going, how did you go about figuring out the structure for it? Is there a big question? Are you trying to discover themes while you're going? How did you go about structuring such a big story that you're trying to tackle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. He came to me in June to kind of say, hey, look, this is kind of like about to happen, and I need you to just dig in and do your thing on research. And so I'll never forget, we had a meeting week 3 of the season where myself, Connor Shell, Jason Hare, who was an executive producer on this, he directed The Last Dance, Libby Geist, another legendary person in this business.
Yeah, these are titans in the space, people that you're talking to. Yeah,
Matt Maxon, who was the showrunner, who was incredible on this. He had just come off of the McMahon film, and he joined us on this as a showrunner. Anyways, we all flew out to Kansas City, and it was the most nervous I've ever been in my entire career. I basically had to present my vision for the series, and I basically wanted to do each episode based on a theme, and I needed to present those themes and kind of the arc and how I saw the film unfolding to a room of Chiefs executives, Skydance executives, NFL Films executives, there were like 40 like high powered people in this room as I was kind of given the floor to like take them through how I saw this unfolding. And it was the scariest thing ever, if I'm being totally honest.
That's amazing though.
But I have to say that, like, you know, family business and the idea of using episode 1 to tell the story of Clark Hunt and his father Lamar, as well as Patrick and his kind of journey with his dad as a baseball legend. That was what we presented for episode 1. Episode 2 was Don't Judge. That was all about Andy Reid and his philosophy.
I think that was my favorite, by the way. Number 2. 1 and 2 were actually, I really liked.
It's also my favorite episode too. And then we had, in our Chiefs era, episode 3 was going to be about the world's team. So a lot of those themes that we originally presented ended up, staying until the end. But episodes 4, 5, and 6 were kind of a work in progress. Obviously, the later we got in the season, we didn't know how things were going to end up. And so we kind of left those a little bit more, with a little bit more space to kind of go and kind of follow the storylines as they unfolded.
That makes sense. So I got to go back to this meeting because that's obviously it's very intense. I'm curious, like prepping for that. Are you like a practice out loud? Do you have all the materials? What is that kind of game day, so to speak, workflow look for you? Because that's honestly, I think a big part of our business that's maybe like not talked about or practiced or in schools is as much as like the technical ability, the ability to communicate your idea is so important.
Yes. And I've learned that the hard way. The pitches are crucial because you can have the ideas in your head and you can have an amazing resume, but if you can't articulate kind of how you see this playing out, the people that don't do this for a living are not going to understand where you're coming from, and they're just not going to be able to see it. And so it is really, really important. And again, I've done some really terrible pitches early in my career where I like totally bombed them. And I was like, but I have this amazing vision. But it didn't come across, right? So it is really important. It is something that's not spoken about enough. And for me, I feel like I can't go in and pitch something that I don't believe in. That's like the biggest thing. And so I needed to make sure that specifically for episodes 1, 2, and 3, I believed in that vision and I saw how it was going to work. And like episode 2 specifically, you mentioned like the Don't Judge thing. Andy Reid, was a legend in my household growing up. I was really familiar with his story. And so that was kind of the first theme that I had in my head. And then obviously the stories of all of the players that he's given second chances to, including Kareem Hunt, Chiefs, and how that was a way to tie that theme and tell the story of Andy Reid, but also tie it back to the current season. So that was the constant thing, was making sure that the two timelines were always kind of in tandem and aligned, and you had present day stories that could tie back to that theme that you were originally presenting. So you always start off like a little bit nervous. And then all of a sudden, like I find that as I'm like just speaking about something that I'm really passionate about and I believe in, I start to feel the buy-in in the room. And so that's kind of, I don't go in with a script. I just go in like knowing like episode 1 is going to be about this. Episode 2 is going to be about this. And Jason Hare gave me an amazing piece of advice. And he's one of my mentors in the business. He's like, keep it simple. Don't overshare with them, because as we know with documentary filmmaking, things could change like this. And so you don't want to like overdo it and give them too much information, because then they're going to hold you to something that you said in September. And then in 6 months after you've talked to all these people for hours and hours on end in interviews, it could totally change. So keep it simple, be passionate. And I think that's the biggest thing. And be conversational. Like I had a producer yesterday ask me like, do you have a script when you walk into these things? And I'm like, I used to. And then I was so stiff and worried that I was going to like forget a line that I was like, I can't do that anymore. People will appreciate authenticity. So that's how I do it. I don't know if that's the right or the wrong way, but
I think it's what's right for you. And yeah, I think authenticity is super important. And I thought that really shone through in the film, in the series as well. And going back to the Don't Judge episode. So for me, like I was covering on Sunday Night Football, like when the whole Kareem Hunt incident happened. And I actually like really appreciated that you guys addressed that whole situation, but in like this redemptive
area. And, you know, because it's like obviously partnering with the Chiefs and everything, you wonder editorially like what it's going to look like. But I really appreciate that you guys went through and addressed that and then had that the whole backstory of Coach Reid and like why he operates the way he does. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, in this day and age where more often than not, you do have to partner with the athlete or the organization in order for them to share the story. Something that's really important to us at Words and Pictures, and we say this right off the bat, is like the second this turns into like a PR puff campaign, like nobody is interested in this thing. Like people are turning this off. Like we have to tell the real story and you have to trust us to do that. And so I do think that thankfully with the Chiefs, like there were no editorial notes. Like Patrick Mahomes has been asked that 1,000 times over the last month. Like, did you give notes on the series? And he's like, no, because they're good at what they do and they know how to do this. Like the only thing that he gave us was like, hey, can you leave out that play call? Because like, we're going to use that this year. Stuff like that, which like, I don't find to be offensive at all editorially.
And like with that, what were some of the maybe bigger obstacles that you had? Obviously it's kind of starting late. It seems like one, I'm sure, and, you know, once you see everything on screen, it's great, but I'm sure it's, as I know, it's not always the smoothest, the process to get there.
Not a lot of sleep, a huge team. That's one thing that I have to say, like, again, another thing that's not talked about enough in this business is you need the people that are working for you on the project to have buy-in. And they are so important to the process. And we just assembled the best team for this project. Like, I have to say also Caroline Cannon, she was another supervising producer on this. Jasper and Nick, I mentioned already, Matt Maxon. But like we had 5 story producers and 5 APs and 5 editors that all came on like early in the process. And we're kind of like building the plane as we're flying it. And they're editing things and then we're changing those things. But for a project that is on such a tight turnaround, like we had to deliver this in May. And we started in September, which for 6 parts. Wow. And
yeah,
again,
and
not
Super Bowl
just
goes
follow.
through February and all, you know, yeah.
And it's not just a follow doc. It's like getting all the archive in because there are historical components. So yeah, I mean, there was like a 50-person team that was dedicated to this from day one. And you're just simultaneously doing things. And for me, as a micromanager who came from a world where I started directing short films. And so I was doing everything. Like it was all me. And so it's, again, Jason Hare, when I started doing these bigger projects, he's like, you're throwing a gala for 5,000 people and you're worried about the flower arrangements on the table.
Where the forks are placed. Yeah.
And like, you need to be able to like delegate and trust people and have the right people in place that you can like see big picture. You know, I had to conduct 65 interviews
oh my gosh.
in 5 months. So again, you gotta have the right people on the team.
And so you're having, so to speak, like second unit people out there and then you're like reviewing what they get. Yeah, there's no way you can be on every shoot, right?
Can't be on every shoot. For me on this, it was really important to do as many interviews, master interviews as possible. So I did like all the interviews with the major players, obviously, you know, GM, president, owner, Patrick, Travis, Chris Jones, Andy Reid. That was really important to me. You know, I had people like Caroline Cannon. She was interviewing some of the journalists and doing some of the peripheral people. And then Jasper and Nick, the 2 producers that were living in Kansas City, they were the guys where if Chris Jones calls them and says, hey, I'm taking my kid to a trampoline park right now. Do you guys want to tag along? And they're there already. And like they can jump in a car and go. So, yeah.
That makes sense. Was there maybe unplanned or surprising storylines like that popped up for you that maybe weren't accounted for when you started?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, you can only do so much research, like, you know, Googling and reading books and stuff. Like you got to like see how these guys are in real life. And for me, Brett Veach, who's the general manager of the team, I found him to be fascinating. And going in,
too.
I did not know what his role was going to be in this film. And the guy is just so authentic. And I think it just comes through in like, you know, all of his interviews and all the scenes we shot with him. And he kind of is like this unsung hero that's behind the scenes throughout this entire dynasty, that he's, you know, always 10 steps ahead of everybody. And so he was somebody that, again, didn't know what his role was going to be, ended up playing a huge part in the series. And then, you know, like, we didn't know DeAndre Hopkins was going to get traded to the Chiefs. We didn't know that they were going to have a ton of injuries in September, and like the whole kind of DNA of the team gets realigned. So you are kind of ebbing and flowing, and you're meeting guys who are super charismatic. And, you know, Justin Reid is one of those people. He gave us great access. Really articulate.
Him and Patrick having babies. That's crazy.
Yes, exactly. So that's stuff that we definitely don't know ahead of time. And I got to give a lot of credit to Patrick, because, you know, the guy just gave us great access. Like he was bought in from the beginning, and, you know, we were at the house and stuff frequently, kind of just capturing little moments.
Yes. Shout out to our friend Jacqueline Dahl, the best. I'm sure she helped a lot with that.
She did. We love Jacqueline, an amazing, amazing partner, and one of the like bosses in this industry. Like I always tell her that I'm like, you are like intimidating in the best way, but you have to be if you're in her position.
But so kind. She has a great balance of it all.
Yes, exactly.
Now, so my three kind of like, I guess, surprises or that stuck out to me was like the Coach Reid, don't judge. Brett Veach was one. As football and draft day fan, hearing the whole, you know, with his daughter drafting Mahomes, that was cool. And then the last being the team history and Lamar Hunt, the visionary. That was like, just to see, you know, how much influence he had on the modern NFL. And the scene when they go into the bunker with the team history, that was incredible. Did you guys know that was a thing, or did you location scout that? How did that whole scene come together?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, it's silly of me that I didn't say that when you asked me like things that we discovered. So no, we did not know that was a thing going in. And probably like a month in, one of the people in the business, on the business side of the team, was like, yeah, and we have a place that we keep all the archives. And I'm like, I'm just such a nerd for like libraries and stuff. And I'm like, oh, like, where is it? And they're like, actually, it's in this underground cave. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? And they said it in passing. They're like, it's not that cool. It's like, fine, whatever. Like, no one's ever down there. There's just this historian that's kind of been curating this collection over decades. And I'm like, can we go down there and see this place? So myself and the rest of the production team like took a little field trip. And again, like, I'm just so, I gravitate towards like really interesting sense of place. I think it's like such a underrated part of what we do, kind of building characters in these cities and in these places. And so we go down there and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like an underground bunker that houses like the history of the Kansas City Chiefs. And then I met the historian, and Bob Moore, he's like, it's like he was cast as like the historian. Like this guy, he has his white gloves on and he's like pulling things out of drawers with magnifying glasses. And I'm like, we have to do something down here. So originally I thought we were just going to take cameras down there with the historian and he was going to kind of show us around. But then I kept thinking to myself, the whole point of this project is connecting the past and the present, and that the Chiefs are singular in that way, where if you sit Patrick Mahomes down, he references Lamar Hunt. Like, what star current player is referencing like the founder of the team? It just doesn't happen. But it's authentic in Kansas City. Like, they're all connected. And so I took a shot in the dark and I was like, hey, like, Clark Hunt, what if we took the 4 stars of the team down here and showed them this amazing space? Have they ever been down here? And he was like, you know, we've never brought a player or a coach down here. And that would be really cool. And so
that's cool.
I had to write up, you know, this whole thing. We did storyboards and we basically put all of the information in Clark Hunt and his team's hands. And we were like, here it is, try to sell them on this. And like, they did the selling to Patrick and Travis and Chris for us. And they came back and they were like, it's a go, 2 weeks, you have to kind of prepare.
Wow. the James Bond villain bunker was great, as Patrick described it. No, that was a incredible scene, and I think that makes sense now. I didn't even think about it watching it, but the connection between the past and the present. I mean, you can't get any better than that.
Exactly. And my personal favorite was that the historian had curated boxes for every active player with all of the artifacts from their histories. And so we didn't tell the guys we were going to show them those boxes that had all of their own stuff in it. And that was a really cool reveal. And, it's really hard to get a guy like Travis Kelce, who is so media savvy and does 1,000 different things, to have like an authentic reaction. And I really did feel like they were little kids down there on a field trip. Like they had no idea what was going to come. And he's like unpacking his box and like genuinely surprised, which was super cool.
That was one question too, is, I think Patrick and Travis, there's no one better from an athlete, working with an athlete standpoint, who just like get it, working like with the media. How did you go about, making this a story, obviously about the Chiefs, appealing to Chiefs fans and Chiefs Kingdom, but making it, have a broader appeal, which I'm sure, is everyone's goal as well, to just non-Chiefs fans and maybe non-football fans?
Yeah. I mean, I'll take a step back and say this, and this is like on the past 5 years of my career. No one ever remembers like an amazing like football sequence or basketball sequence. Like when you talk to somebody after they watch them, they're like, that Ravens game was cut really well, or like the AFC Championship game. It's like people can watch the games to get the game. The thing about these projects is like you want to reveal a layer of these superstars that nobody knows about. That is like the main thing going in. I'm like, if I don't teach people something new about Patrick Mahomes, like I haven't done my job. And that's really hard for people that are super well covered and, we're in the media all the time. Again, it's the trust thing, right? It's like Patrick was really forthcoming about the relationship between him and his father. He had never talked about that publicly.
No, yeah.
Patrick had never given his childhood home videos to a production team. We got 8 hours of incredible footage of him growing up. Like those are the things that I think people remember, and they're the hardest things to get, right? Because when you first meet someone, you're like, hey, talk about your family's adversity and hand over all of your lifelong, you know what I mean? Like that's just not so, but over time you hope that you get to that point with them. And when you do, it's really special.
Speaking of meeting someone, the big question is, did you get to meet Taylor Swift?
I did not get to meet her. I went into this thinking that this was about the team and we were going to focus on the team. But of course, she is a huge part of the Chiefs community and the Chiefs Kingdom. And she's also changed their fan base. And so she is relevant to the story of the team. And so our goal was we were going to make her a presence, but we were not going to make her a focus. And I do have to share this story because this whole industry is about relationship building, right? At the premiere, Travis came up to me and he said, I really, really appreciate how you handled the whole thing with Taylor. He's like, Tay,
that's
and I
awesome.
really appreciate it. And he's like, thank you. Because I do think like the whole TMZ generation, it's like, I think he was worried about how it was going to come across. But ultimately we're making a football movie. But I think there was a good balance. And episode 3, talking about her first game and Andy Reid joking about how he knew Taylor before. I think it's all really fun. And I hope we struck the balance of giving people enough without feeling like we shortchanged.
No, totally. And it's like it's a tough place to be as a filmmaker because you can't not address it, but you also have the trust of these players and these guys too. So that's awesome. He paid you that compliment. And that was one of my next questions is, yes, you just came off the huge premiere in Kansas City with the team. How did it go? What was the reaction to, watch it? I'm sure you've seen it so many times, but actually see it with the live audience and all the people you've been working with the last few months.
It was really cool. I mean, anytime you get the chance to have your work play on the big screen, it's always like a pretty surreal experience. And yeah, I mean, the guys had an amazing reaction. Like, it's always fun to see what the audience laughs at and gasps at and has a reaction to, you know, the cheers. So that was all really, really cool. We showed episode 1, and I thought it played pretty well. And, you know, like, again, it's so fun. Rarely do you get to go back and see the subjects that you've worked so closely with over the course of a year and have that kind of celebratory moment with everybody. And again, like, Coach Reid has been very reserved about his personal life. It's kind of been this thing that's been off limits to the media. And for him to say, like, thank you, it means something to me. It does. And again, I know we're unbiased, and I know that we're, you know, it, like, the lines of entertainment and journalism are constantly, you know, it's a fine line between those things. But you obviously want to do justice to the people who you're telling the story about. And they seem to be really happy with how things turned out. That's
great to hear. And like I said, you guys definitely have to watch it, check it out. I think it's balance is just a great word. It strikes all the things, all the emotions that you're feeling as a football fan, but while giving history and context. But I want to transition because you've done so much more incredible work. And so if you haven't seen The Kingdom, make sure you check it out. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the Giannis doc that came out last year. You know, just watching back through your work, I think The Kingdom is like very much classic, like NFL films, documentary. But the Giannis one, I felt like was a really big swing creatively, both like in the visual language and the story structure. You know, how did you approach that? And, you know, recreations are like a really big thing in that doc, which you don't see in The Kingdom, but you know, showing kind of your vast skill set with that there. I guess, how did you go about approaching that doc and bringing just a little bit different flavor to a sports documentary with the Giannis one?
That is like a labor of love for me because I'm 100% Greek and I grew up in a basketball family, as I mentioned. So that one felt more personal. I had an existing relationship with Giannis, dating back to when I worked at ESPN. And so when he was ready to finally tell his story, they felt like I was the right person to do that through Words and Pictures, which was really cool. But going into that one, it was really important to me that it did have a different feel because he is not your stereotypical NBA player. He's just not. He's not wired that way. Like, the second you meet him, he's philosophical and he's been through things that no one else has been through. And he comes from this different place. And so all of those things immediately kind of were like, okay, this has to have a different feel and a different tone. With him, we did not have like any blueprint for how this film was going to kind of unfold and what the narrative and what the arc was going to be. It kind of came to light the more time we spent with him. And so obviously his father, an undocumented immigrant who did everything, gave everything up for his children and moved from Africa to Greece in search of a better life for his kids. And then his dad tragically dying in the middle of his career. Those were the moments that Giannis just kept going back to. I just saw how much his dad meant to him and how it had informed pretty much everything in his life, both while he was living and then afterwards. And so the arc of this immigrant and telling the immigrant story for me was so much more important than telling the basketball story. We also spent 3 weeks in Greece with him. We also shot all of the recreations in Greece because we wanted them to be authentic. And so I
love them.
The sense of place in Greece, because he's Greek, like he feels in his heart of hearts that he's Greek, but it's really complicated because it was a country that didn't accept him and his family for so long. And so like that push and pull and that conflict that he feels about the country he's from, like that to me was the movie. And so I sold my, it's not cheap to shoot in Europe for a month, but I sold my company on the fact that like his story in Greece was so important and we needed to shoot the recreation in the real places that those events occurred. because if we shot them in an LA sound studio, it just wasn't going to feel the same. The textures of the floors, that like you just couldn't recreate
The
those
markets,
things.
yeah, all of those things. Mm-hmm.
Unless you were there. And with him, he had probably 10 childhood photos. There's no footage of him until he's 16 years old. So I'm not a huge recreation fan. Like I'm very much a like live in the archive. But for this, we had to go for it. But I was like, we have to approach it differently, or people are just not going to buy in. And so I appreciate you saying that you like the recreations, because we took a lot of time and effort to make sure, like, we rented the apartment that Giannis grew up in to actually shoot those recreations in that apartment, because we just wanted that authenticity.
No, that's the thing. None of it, and I think to your point, is because it was on location. Like none of it felt cheesy to me. It all felt like it just tied in seamlessly. And I gotta ask, where was his master interview location? That was like one of the coolest locations. Was that in Greece or was that somewhere else?
It's funny. That's actually the Museum of Art in Milwaukee.
Wow.
And so originally what we wanted to do was we wanted to do 2 master interviews, one in Greece and one in Milwaukee. That didn't end up happening. He ended up playing for the Greek national team. And so he just couldn't take the 3 or 4 hours out of his time in Greece to do the interview. But so we ended up with instead this like big, wide, epic, bright white space. And then the second interview was this like dark, intimate space. And I kind of felt like we needed that contrast, because as you got to know him more throughout the film, we used the kind of intimate close-up interview later, as you've kind of gotten to know him better. But yeah, I mean, that is one of the all-time most epic spots ever to do an interview. And in fact, I've just started a new project, and the producers hate me because I keep saying to them, like, they keep trying to give me locations for the master interview. And I'm like, nope, it's not epic enough. And they're like, listen, we're never going to find that again. Like, you got to just let it go.
That's so funny. So you've worked, with some incredible athletes really at the top of their game: Mahomes, Kelce, Giannis, Caitlin Clark on the full court press. What are kind of some of the themes you see like with them being at the top, and has that kind of rubbed off on you at all as a filmmaker?
It's a great question. I think the idea of fame is something that's fascinating when you're talking to these people, right? Because for the average person, you think, oh my gosh, like they have it all. Like, how lucky are they? But dealing with fame, especially as like a young person and navigating that, is really hard and isolating. And I think that, I learned that through Giannis, which was my like first kind of big swing in the moment film. Just seeing and observing him walking the streets of Greece, and how he told me, he's like, I used to be able to ride the subway and I loved riding the subway in Greece, and now I can't do that anymore. And like, I can't go to the market, and I can't. And so then I guess that informed me when I went into Caitlin Clark, because here's this woman who, I mean, the
Superstar.
biggest jump, right? It's like, she is this like 16-year-old girl from the Midwest, and now she is this global icon. And it kind of happened overnight. And it's really hard. And I think that, just that navigation of fame has always fascinated me. Like, even going back to like watching The Last Dance, like my favorite scene in that movie is when Jordan is laying on the couch in his suite. And just talking about how like he can't go out, and like this is him relaxing. And it's just so sad and lonely, in my opinion. And so that's just something that I always try to tackle, I suppose, in my films with these really big superstars.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, for me, I've been able to see it up close to it is like a very interesting kind of weird thing to figure out. And I think, yeah, but I think that's why it shows through in your work, why the trust is there, because you're being delicate with that. So I think that's cool that it shines through. And now let's talk a little bit about your career journey. You've done obviously some incredible projects, the last 4 or 5 years, but you obviously didn't start there. I know you started at ESPN. What would you say was kind of your like big break to take you on the trajectory you're on now?
Yeah. So, started off as a production assistant in Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN, as many do. I kind of always knew I wanted to get into storytelling, and 30 for 30 was launching when I was a PA at ESPN. And to me, like, that was just the most amazing thing. Like, we can make
For many of us, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what? This is crazy. And I remember like watching every single one, and I was just kind of bold, and like I would set up meetings with some of the people that were making it at ESPN when I was 22 years old. And I would just like pick their brains, and every single person told me, they were like, ideas are our greatest currency as storytellers. Like, you need the idea. That's how somebody is going to give you the chance. You can't say, I want to make, when you're 25 years old, I want to make a movie about Kobe Bryant. Like, people are going to laugh at you. You need to go find a unique idea that nobody else has and say, I want to do this. And that's how you kind of build your body of work. And so that really resonated with me. And I ended up in this group called the Features Unit at ESPN. And there, you do anything from short form 2-minute feature stories to, these SC features, which were opportunities to do 30-minute like short films, essentially. And I was like, that's what I need to do. I need to find an amazing SC featured short film idea. And the first one that I found that I pitched is bizarre, but it's still one of my favorite things I've ever done. It's about a team of adventure racers from Sweden who were doing a 500-mile race in Ecuador for the world championships of this really niche sport. And along their journey, a stray dog starts to follow them through the race. And the dog follows them 430 miles through this race and crosses the finish line with them.
That's crazy.
It was the most insane thing. And the dog had been abused and the whole backstory. And he was, he has wounds all over his body, but like he just takes to this group and the group falls in love with this dog. And they end up adopting the dog and bringing the dog back to Sweden with them. And the dog's name is Arthur. And Arthur becomes a national celebrity in Sweden. He's on every talk show. Books are written about him. He's a celebrity. And it's this story about this captain of the team who was a little bit of a selfish guy, a little bit of an egomaniac. And he meets this dog and it just kind of grounds him and humbles him. And it's this relationship between this guy and his dog. And so I pitched it. My bosses thought I was insane. They were like, what is this? And I was like, please just give me 9 days in Sweden to do this. And I had, I got to give credit, Jose Morales and Victor Vitarelli, who are two of the most amazing mentors in my career. They gave me a budget and they said, this is your chance. Like, don't mess this up. And we went to Sweden and we shot the film, and it ended up being nominated for multiple Emmys. And they actually used it as the genesis for a scripted adaptation that Mark Wahlberg was in last year called King Arthur. And I was a consultant.
Oh, wow. Okay. I remember seeing, that's crazy. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So that was like my first big break. But again, it was like this weird story that I found. And then I kind of continued with that formula. So I pitched a story about a female golfer in Nepal. I pitched a story about a basketball court in the Philippines, a boxing gym that trained women in self-defense as in response to the epidemic of missing girls on the reservation. So there were always these kind of niche places that had amazing sense of place, incredible characters. And that's kind of how I did it in the beginning.
And I would say, like, with that, I'm curious with kind of a little bit more on like the balancing the technical side versus the idea. Are you someone that like you can go out and shoot it and put it all together? Or are you more like finding the right team to help you tell the story? How do you go about approaching that really for like younger filmmakers of today to really like go out and make things happen?
Yeah. So usually on my first scout anywhere, like I'll use Nepal as an example. It's like I'm bringing my 5D. I'm going there. I'm taking tons of photos, like amateur videos. I personally, like, I'm more of an edit person as opposed to a shooter. Like, I don't think I can, I wouldn't be able to film like an entire project by myself. But on those first trips, you know, you're getting some visuals again for the pitch. You got to be able to sell it when you come back. So you got to have some way to kind of make this place feel alive. I've also hired like local film people in Nepal to like, hey, come with me and shoot this interview with me, or we're going to do this walk and talk. So I have some sort of some materials to bring back with me for the pitch. So I do think that's really important to be able to capture visuals, even on the scout, to make sure you can sell the idea to people.
That makes a lot of sense. And I would say, kind of with that on the technical side, I think the other thing that's, you know, really amazing to me, you know, you going through all of what you've been doing in these projects, you know, while being, you know, an amazing mother and wife. How do you go about balancing the family aspect of it? I'm still figuring that out. I have a 2-year-old, but it's definitely a challenge. And, you know, these projects, as you mentioned, are very time demanding.
Yeah. And I don't know if the word amazing would be used to describe me, but I do my best.
I think all mothers are amazing.
No, but in all seriousness, like, it was a non-starter for me coming up. Like, I wanted a family. I wanted, you know, a marriage. Those were things that were really important to like my core values. And it's interesting because when I was coming up and I looked around, there actually weren't a ton of women who were married with kids that also did this. And that kind of intimidated me a little bit. I'm like, can I pull this off? But you need support. My husband also is a filmmaker. We fell in love making movies, and we kind of said in the beginning that neither of us was going to give up this dream because we feel like it's our calling. And so we definitely tag team parenting. He's on a shoot right now. I'm here. I'll leave for a shoot on Monday. He'll come back. We high five in the airport. But you need a great support system, of course. That includes grandparents and nannies and all those things. My thing is, and people ask me all the time, like, do you feel like you're missing out on these like amazing moments with your kids? And like, it's super, super hard. And it is emotional when you're on a shoot for a week. However, I like to think that in the long run, them seeing me kind of do something that I'm so passionate about and something I've dreamed of my entire life, seeing their mom happy in doing that is going to be a good example for them, I hope. And, you know, when I'm here,
Totally.
I try to be as present as possible. And that's also the beauty of kind of being a filmmaker is like, you're gone and you're on the road, but when you're home, you do get the flexibility. You know, I don't have to be in an office from 9 to 7 every night. I can take a break from my work and pick up my daughter from school and stuff like that. But it's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. I would say to people who want to be a parent, like, don't give up on this dream because it definitely is doable.
Yep. And I think what I tell you, just like you said, you figure it out. You make it works. What works for you. So
every
that's
week
exciting.
is different.
Yep. And then, for me, I just had a big, exciting announcement that my first feature doc is coming out. So I'm curious, kind of to flip the tables on you. I'm looking for a little bit of advice for me or any other, first-time directors out there. I'd be curious, with the incredible work you've done, what advice you have.
Well, first of all, I'm super psyched for you, and I know you're going to nail
Thank
it.
you.
And you have an incredible body of work, specifically in the NFL. So I think your knowledge going in is already giving you like a leg up on, most people. But for a first-time filmmaker, I would say, don't be afraid to take risks. I feel like often people play it really safe because it's their first time. They're like, I don't want to screw anything up. But ultimately, like, people are going to remember you if you have a take, a lens, a style. Like, all of that's really important. And like, you're going to try some things that aren't going to work, and like, that's okay. But I think it's better to try something than to just play it super safe down the middle. Especially if it is a feature and you have a little bit more time to kind of let things unfold and really have like a visual language. You mentioned that about Giannis. With the Chiefs, I couldn't do that because it was just so fast. So we were trying to take creative risks and we were trying to tell really cool stories. And I think the caves was one thing that visually was unique, but ultimately, like, it was happening so fast that it was just hard. For you, though, I think take chances, have a visual language, and that can be done through graphics, through music. It can be done in so many different ways, but don't be afraid to take risks would be my best piece of advice.
No, I appreciate that. I was in a creative meeting about it yesterday, and one thing I said was like, I want to bring like a strong POV to this and not play it down the middle, because I've watched enough of them when you can tell when they're straddling the line, playing it safe. So I appreciate the encouragement on that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's just such a different industry than it was 5 or 10 years ago. There's just so much that comes out. And the greatest compliments that I've ever received are people who watch Giannis and they're like, I kind of was like flipping through and I'm like, oh, another sports doc about a, NBA player. And I watched it and I was like, wow, that's super different. That's the greatest compliment.
Totally. I agree. And I was texting with you last night. I'm like, oh my gosh, watching this as a parent, the Giannis doc, it's like, it hits so different. It was unbelievable. So yeah, that's a great example of, taking a big swing, I think, both visually and then within like the context of the story. And I would say with that, just to wrap up here, who, with that, there's obviously like this sports doc lane, but are there any like these kind of big either figures or pieces, of work that have really influenced you, or people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to have like heroes in this business. And Ezra Edelman is one of those people for me. OJ Made in America, I think, is the greatest documentary of all time, not just sports documentary. I think it's just genius the way that he tackled, this really big story and juxtapose that with race in America. Anytime you can, use a figure or vehicle to kind of tell a bigger story, I just think it's just so brilliant. And he's been really kind to me. He's taken a few of my calls and I just pick his brain and ask him 1,000 questions. And he did do that Prince thing, which isn't going to come out, which is such a shame because he's one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met. And Jason Hare is another one of my mentors, as I mentioned earlier. He's now kind of moving beyond sports and tackling some really fascinating stories. He did Murders in Boston for HBO. He did the Elvis doc for Netflix. And he's doing something really cool right now that's not in the sports world. And so just picking his brain on the differences, right? Like, I've only been in sports. So eventually I do want to try to tackle something new, and trying to understand how that transition is for him is super, super helpful. But Searching for Sugarman, one of my favorite films of all time, Man on Wire, like, these are all the OG docs that have nothing to do with sports that I've watched 1,000 times and I just take notes and learn something new every time I watch them.
That's great. And I would say last thing to wrap up here is, from a theme, just talking with you, it seems like mentorship, finding the right people, has been very important to you and served you very well. How have you gone about, approaching and finding those mentors? Because I think it's important for younger people out there.
It is so key to have mentors, and also to not have an ego. Right? Like, I still I literally called one of my friends that's in this industry, that's a director, that is like very similar to me in terms of, he's not older, he's kind of doing this at the same time as me. And I just called him to pick his brain on something that I was struggling with. I think it's really important to be open and honest and acknowledge, like, you don't have all the right answers all the time. And sometimes you need to pick someone's brain if you're, you have that writer's block or whatever. And so I think it's essential. I had amazing mentors at ESPN. Jose Morales, Ben Weber. They would sit with me for hours just going through scripts and, giving me feedback. And John Minton is another guy at ESPN that's brilliant that I really relied on. So yeah, I would just say find mentors, and people who are in those shoes are willing to help you because they were at once a young filmmaker that didn't know that had mentors. So don't feel like you have to figure it out all on your own. Like, definitely try to, build relationships with people in the industry, and they're more likely to help you than you'd probably think.
Yeah, you don't know if you don't ask, right?
It's true. You're always learning. You learn something new on every project. You never have all the answers.
I would say then with that to close, like what did the Kingdom teach you that as a filmmaker?
Great question. It taught me a lot about making a project that resonates on a super quick timeline. And that is like something that's like pretty technical, but it's something that's essential. Like I got out of live TV because I hate being rushed. I don't like that feeling of like, but the way that this kind of business is evolving, like the turnarounds are getting quicker because it's cheaper. And so you got to learn how to be decisive, right? And prioritize those creative choices and the storytelling choices and the themes, because those are the things that are going to distinguish your work. And I think that, I learned how to delegate on this project in a way that I hadn't before. And that's why I keep shouting out all these people, because they were like instrumental to this thing being great. And I also learned a lot through Andy Reid, honestly.
How could you not? Yeah.
I mean, the guy, I have to share the story. The last day of filming, we're in his office and I was like, Coach, that's it. We're done. Like, get rid of us finally. And he was like, that's it? And he gives me a big hug and he turns around and he takes the don't judge card off of his board that's been there for 20 years and he gives it to me as a gift.
No.
And
wow.
I literally like started crying. I was like,
oh, did you cry?
I was like, I can't take this. I cannot take this. He's like, take it. So I am now having it framed so that it sits over my desk. And I think it's the best reminder of all time, just in your life, to not judge.
Wow. That's an incredible way to close this out here. That's a mic drop right there. That's really cool. So Kristen,
really
thank you so much. This was such a insightful and just wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you coming on Frame by Frame. I cannot wait to see what you do next, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise, and I can't wait to see the film. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more, make sure that you subscribe to my channel. And if you could rate us on the platform you're listening to, that would be a huge help to get the word out. I would really appreciate 5 stars if this conversation was helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Frame by Frame.